I overheard my fiancée saying, "He's just a placeholder, I'll dump him once the ceremony is covered." Her friends giggled. I went along, then left her at the altar. This morning, her sister messaged me, "She's falling apart, please respond." I remember the exact moment when my life felt like it was finally falling into place. It was in the heart of Seattle, in a cozy little coffee shop that smelled of roasted beans and whispered secrets. I was there, wrestling with my laptop, trying to make sense of some work that seemed determined to elude me. That's when I saw her, Emily, lost in the pages of a book on modern art, her eyes dancing with the colors of her imagination. Our eyes met, and after a few awkward smiles, we found ourselves in a conversation that stretched into hours, fueled by caffeine and curiosity. Emily was unlike anyone I had ever met. Her laughter was infectious, her passion for life was palpable, and her interest in me felt genuine. It wasn't long before we were dating, and within a year, I knew she was the one. I proposed to her right there in that coffee shop, the very spot where our story began. She said yes, and we embarked on planning our dream wedding. Her friends, Sarah and Jessica, were always around, their laughter filling our apartment as they helped with the preparations. They were like family, and I felt welcomed into their tight circle. Everything was perfect, or so I thought. Then, one evening, just weeks before the wedding, I came home early from work. The house was unusually quiet, and as I walked towards the kitchen, I heard voices, hushed and urgent. I paused, not wanting to interrupt, but something in the tone made me linger. It was Sarah, her voice tinged with concern. "Are you sure about this, Emily? Alex seems so in love with you." Emily's response was a whisper, but it carried a weight that made my heart sink. I stood there, frozen, as the conversation unfolded in front of me. Emily had invited Sarah and Jessica over to our apartment to help finalize the guest list for our wedding. I was in the kitchen, pretending to be busy with dinner preparations, but really, I was just enjoying the sounds of their laughter and planning. That's when I heard Emily's voice, clear as day. "He's just a stepping stone, I'll leave him once the wedding is paid for." Her friends laughed, and my heart plummeted into despair. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was this all a game to her? The woman I loved, the one I thought was my soulmate, was talking about me like I was some kind of transaction. Betrayal and confusion swirled in my mind, a storm of emotions that I couldn't control. I decided to play along, to see how far this charade would go. With a forced smile, I walked into the living room, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hey, do you need any help with the wedding plans?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Emily turned to me, her smile radiant, and kissed me on the cheek. It felt like I was in a movie, acting out a role I never signed up for. The warmth of her lips against my skin was now a bitter reminder of the deceit. As I stood there, surrounded by the women who had become like family, I felt isolated, an outsider in my own home. The laughter, the planning, it all felt like a facade. Now, I was caught in a web of lies, and the woman I loved was at the center of it, pulling the strings of deceit. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur. I continued to act as if nothing had changed, but inside, I was plotting my escape. Emily was oblivious, too caught up in the excitement of the wedding to notice my changed demeanor. I made sure everything was perfect, from the flowers to the venue, all while planning my exit strategy. The night before the wedding, Emily's sister Laura came over. She was always the more perceptive one, and I wondered if she knew anything about Emily's plans. We talked about the wedding, and she seemed genuinely happy for us. That night, I barely slept, my mind replaying Emily's words over and over. The wedding day arrived, and everything was set. Emily looked stunning in her dress, and as we stood at the altar, I could see the anticipation in her eyes. But as the priest asked if anyone had any objections, I turned to Emily, took her hands in mine, and said, "I do have something to say." The room fell silent, the air thick with suspense. Emily's eyes widened, a mix of confusion and fear flickering through them. I could feel the weight of every gaze upon us, the guests holding their breath, waiting for my next words. "Emily," I began, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I've stood by your side, planned this day with you, and I've loved you with every part of my being. But there's something you should know." I paused, letting the gravity of the moment sink in. "I overheard your conversation with Sarah and Jessica. I know about your plan to leave me after the wedding, to use me as a stepping stone for your own gain." Gasps echoed through the church, and Emily's face drained of color. Her grip on my hands tightened, a desperate plea for silence, but I couldn't stop now. "I've been living in a lie, Emily. A lie where I thought we were building a future together, but now I see the truth. And here, in front of everyone we love, I need to make my own choice. No specific typo here, but ensure clarity in the sentence." The priest looked between us. The church was silent, all eyes on me. I looked at Emily, her face a mix of confusion and fear. "Emily," I began, my voice steady, "I've loved you, but I can't marry someone who sees me as nothing more than a means to an end." Gasps echoed through the church. Emily's face turned pale, and her friends looked at each other in shock. I continued, "I heard your plans, Emily. I heard you say I was just a stepping stone. I've played along, but I can't go through with this." I turned to the guests. "I'm sorry for the spectacle, but I couldn't live a lie." With that, I walked out of the church, leaving behind a stunned silence. As I stepped into the crisp Seattle air, my heart was pounding, not just from the adrenaline of the moment, but from the weight of what I had just done. The city's skyline, usually a comforting sight, now seemed indifferent to my turmoil. I walked down the steps, each one echoing with the finality of my decision. The street was quiet, the usual bustle of the city muted by the gravity of what had just transpired. I felt the eyes of the world on me, or perhaps it was just the lingering gaze of the guests from the church. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The betrayal was too raw, too fresh. My mind raced with thoughts of what could have been, of the life I had envisioned with Emily. The laughter, the shared dreams, all of it now, tainted by her deceit. I had loved her, truly, but love alone couldn't bridge the chasm of her intentions. I found myself at the coffee shop where it all began, the same place where I first saw her, where our story unfolded. The barista, recognizing me, gave a sympathetic nod. I ordered a coffee, the same one I had when I first met Emily, and sat at our table. The warmth of the coffee cup in my hands was a stark contrast to the coldness I felt inside. I replayed the scene in the church over and over. The look on Emily's face, the shock of her friends, the aftermath of the wedding was nothing short of chaotic. Emily's parents, their faces etched with confusion and concern, tried to follow me as I made my way out of the church. But I needed space, time to process the storm of emotions swirling within me. I drove to a nearby park, the kind where families usually gather, but today it felt like a sanctuary for my solitude. I sat on a bench, the world going by in a blur of colors and sounds, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. My phone buzzed incessantly, each vibration a reminder of the life I had just left behind. But I ignored it, until a message from Laura, Emily's sister, caught my eye. "She's losing it, please answer." I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. The last thing I wanted was to dive back into the drama, but Laura's plea was genuine, her voice in my mind filled with tears. I called her back, and she answered almost immediately, her voice breaking, as she explained how Emily was inconsolable, how she had confessed everything to her family. Laura pleaded with me, her words a mix of desperation and hope, to talk to Emily, to give her a chance to explain. Despite the pain, I agreed to meet her, not for reconciliation, but for closure. When I met Emily at our old coffee shop, the one where our love story had begun, she was a shadow of her former self. Her eyes, once vibrant with life, were now dulled by regret. She admitted everything, her voice trembling as she spoke of feeling trapped by societal expectations, of thinking she could change her feelings after the wedding. She begged for forgiveness, her words a torrent of apologies and explanations. But as I listened, I knew our paths had diverged irreparably. The trust was shattered, the foundation of our relationship crumbled. "I'm sorry, Alex," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "I thought I could make it work, but I was wrong. So wrong." I looked at her, the woman I had loved, now a stranger in the ruins of our shared dreams. "Emily," I said, my voice steady. In the weeks that followed, I moved out of our shared apartment, sold the ring, and started anew. The pain was there, but so was a sense of liberation. I began to focus on myself, rediscovering old hobbies, and making new friends. Emily, through Laura, sent apologies and updates about her life, but I kept my distance, knowing that some bridges are better left unrepaired. One day I received a letter from Emily. It wasn't an apology, but a thank you. She wrote about how my decision at the altar had forced her to confront her own issues, leading her to therapy and a new path of self-discovery. She was grateful, in her way, for the harsh lesson I had inadvertently taught her. As for me, I found solace in the simple things, like the coffee shop where it all began. Life moved on, and while the scar remained, it was a reminder of a lesson learned in love, trust, and the importance of being true to oneself. The city of Seattle, with its ever-changing weather, seemed to mirror my own journey of healing. Some days were bright and clear, filled with laughter and new connections, while others were shrouded in fog, a reflection of the lingering doubts and what-ifs. But each day, I pushed forward, embracing the solitude and the freedom it brought. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. The brush strokes on the canvas became my therapy, each color a piece of my soul being laid bare. I joined a local art group where I met people who appreciated art for what it was, a reflection of life's complexities. There, I found not just friends, but a community that understood the language of healing through creation. Emily's letter, though unexpected, was a catalyst. It didn't reopen wounds, but rather sealed them with a sense of closure. Her words, "Thank you for showing me the mirror," echoed in my mind, a poignant reminder of how sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most profound growth. I often thought about what could have been, the life we planned together, but those thoughts were fleeting. They were replaced by a new vision, one where I was the protagonist of my own story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.